Okay, so this is really crazy, but I wanted my listeners to get the story behind the story of this whole book because today is the day where Imperfect Courage is really out into the world. Like if you order it on Prime, you'll be getting it tomorrow. And this is so nutso. And I really wanted my Going Scared listeners to get that story behind the story. And I thought, well, who else could interview me that has actually lived this message with me, walked with me for the past 8 years through it all. And of course, I thought of one of my best friends, Jennie Allen. Jennie Allen is the author of multiple books. Hopefully you have read plenty of them. And she's also one of my best friends. Our kids are from the same orphanage in Rwanda. Cooper is her son, and so y'all know Jack is mine. And Jennie, you encouraged me to write this book.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was easy because I got to watch firsthand this incredible, beautiful thing called Noonday Be Birthed. And what was fun is I was launching an organization at nearly the exact same time, as well as we adopted our boys the same time. So we were juggling so many different things, but gosh, we walked through this together. And so much of the things that you talk about in this book, Jess, we talked about over the phone or over coffee. And it was just encouraging to see it in print, to see this story that is so powerful. It is so powerful, laid out in this way. It's absolutely exciting. And I'm so happy for you. Congratulations. It's a huge day, and it's a day to celebrate because the road to getting to this point, I know, besides just writing the book, it's also the living of the book that's so costly.
Yeah. Well, and tomorrow night I'll be in Dallas with you celebrating in person. So if you guys are in Dallas, it's not too late to go get a ticket. Go to jessicahonegger.com for a ticket. Okay, so Jennie, this is really crazy. I'm sure we're going to cry and laugh so hard over the next hour, but I remember and I write this whole story in my book, but it was like we already had done the hard work of getting all of our paperwork to Rwanda. You and I actually both had identified sons, which was not the case for most people, but through sort of a series of circumstances, we had a hunch of exactly, like we had a little person that we knew was going to be ours. And then Rwanda's like, nope, we just can't. Like, there's too much going on. Things have escalated. And unless you get your paperwork to Rwanda in the next 24 hours, like, you're not going to get your kid. And thankfully, the embassy in DC classified as Rwanda. It counted. And I needed a few more pieces. You were a little further along than me. You just needed one last little piece of paperwork. And we had not met. So we did not know each other. Mm-hmm. And then someone's like, okay, Jennie Allen, she's waiting. She just has this one thing that she needs to change, can you take her paperwork for her? So I'm like, okay, so I'm rushing around getting my paperwork signed. And then I remember I went by your house, and I think you were in the middle of a Bible study or something, like you had a woman over. And I was like, so what do you do? And you were like, oh, I got my theological degree and I went to seminary and now I just love to teach women Bible studies. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And you're like, oh, I like your earrings. And I'm like, oh yeah, I had this little thing that I started to try to raise money to bring Jack home. And like, that's how we met. And then I like took your paperwork. I begged and borrowed and did everything I could to get all of the signatures that we needed in DC. And you got Cooper a few minutes later. I got Jack. And then that was like the beginning of our friendship, which is kind of where this book started.
It's exactly where it started. Well, I know. And when I picked up the book for the first time, I was like, oh, we're starting at the beginning of our relationship. Like this is exactly where it started. And so it is so fitting for me to be interviewing you because not only is this the story of your life and Jack's life, it's a story of so many women's lives, Jess, because this, from that day and your cute earrings, it has gone on and reached the world. Noonday has shaped the lives of thousands upon thousands of women. And that's just the jobs, not the cute jewelry that everybody has partnered with and the people that feel like they're a part of helping the mission because they buy the jewelry. So let's talk big picture before we go into the story, the individual stories. And let's talk about what this means for you to see this on paper to see this huge, beautiful thing that has grown so fast. I mean, I'm sure you've barely had time to take it in over these years, Jess. So what was that like to put your life on paper and really the miracle of Noonday
Yeah.
down?
That is the gift of writing a book. And I would wish it for anyone. I really would. I mean, I know maybe not everyone wants to write or can get published or all of that stuff, but the actual process of stopping was honestly, that was one of the biggest gifts. I could cry, start thinking about it because I was doing that this time last year. I was holed up and writing this thing. And it's true. I mean, the journey has been so crazy. And when you're running something and building something, as you know, as the founder of If Gathering, you have got meetings, you've got people to boss and manage, and you've got marketing campaigns to design, and you've got interviews to do. And, I'm designing jewelry and I'm the chief creative officer as well as the co-CEO of Noonday. And so there really was not a lot of just stopping and looking back. And there's just something so powerful about stopping and celebrating. And you and I, we're both sevens on the Enneagram, and we don't do this well. Like, we're always ready to go, okay, that's done. What's next?
Yep.
And that's also how we get to do what we do. Like, there is such a beauty that I'm a catalyzer and I'm an activator, and that I have a bias towards action, and that I'm always on the go. But the underbelly of that is not stopping and simply looking back and celebrating, and not just celebrating, but also being able to see the story and the threads that have been woven together and that are, creating a future too. And so I think for me, even though the process was extremely challenging, like actually writing a book, but as you know, I had a lot of help involved. So I had midwives. I worked with a coach who really helped me create the framework of the book and the story arc, and taught me how you go back and forth between time and how do you actually form a narrative. And then we have someone on our Noonday Collection team who is our full content strategist. And she and I have worked together for 5 years now, and just had been writing partners for a long time. And so whenever I got stuck, I kind of got to go, here, you take it. And then I have another person who was on our team for many years, a dear friend of mine, Lindsay, and she was our corporate strategist, and prior to that was a strategist for really large companies, and has her Harvard MBA. And she has this knack of being able to take like 5,000 words and then condense them down into like 20, and like it still says like the same powerful thing.
Wow.
And so I worked with her, and I just, I am someone, and the whole second part of my book is about that. It's about not going it alone. And I think when you imagine a book writing process, I feel like it has this perception of like you hole up and you do it alone, and you just like write away, and like you're like you don't bathe for days, and you're drinking coffee and you're smoking your cigarettes and you're not eating and whatever. Like there's like the brooding author image we get in our heads, and I'm like, man, that does not sound fun to me at all. And I think once I realized that, oh, other people want to partner with me in this, and I could do it with. And, I mean, I would call you up and be like, I'm stuck on this. I'm so stuck. What do I do? And, I think that is really what helped me to be able to move forward. And even though, just like in childbirth, we romanticize our past, like, or we'd never have more children. I think we have to do that with a book because, I mean, it is so challenging to.
Yeah, I'll remind you that many days you called me a mess. You were like, "This is horrible." Yes, and
See, I don't remember any of that
I do. But I will say this, Jess, how beautiful that you wrote this book in the same way you live, which is in collaboration. And you modeled this so well, top to bottom. And you modeled that well for me with the book process too. Honestly, I always say the book process is a big group project where one person gets the credit.
Yeah.
But it's so good to tell people behind the scenes. It's so true that they're really, all writers are working with teams of people to create something like this. And
well, and I had, I think it was just 5 months before starting to write Imperfect Courage, I had set in with you on, I think, what became Nothing to Prove. At one point, it was like Thirst. I mean, it was so many
Yeah.
things. It was so many things. And I think walking that process with you was super helpful. Like, I remember I was on a trip to Peru and you were like, my book title is due tomorrow. And I'm like, okay, we got this. And we're like tossing back
I
names
know.
and definitely
Yes.
having walked with that through that with you, like the title process and
Yeah. Cover
the
process.
cover
Yeah.
process, and then
Yeah.
even writing out an outline and a framework with you one day, when you were
Yep.
kind of in the war room doing that. It was really helpful for me. So I mean, I don't take it lightly that God totally hooked me up with. I have so many dear friends. Jen Hatmaker, Shauna Nequist helped me a ton. She's the one who connected me to my agent, and also to Ashley, one of the people who collaborated with me. I mean, I got some people in my court that had walked before me, and that was obviously really helpful. Which, for anyone listening right now who's like thinking about writing a book, let this be. I think sometimes we can look at people who are like, oh, well, she's got friends that are authors. Well, you've got podcasts. I can be in your brain trust, girl. You don't have to know me in real life to be in my for me to be in your brain trust. I mean, I got so many people in my brain trust that are dead.
Well, let's talk about that, because I do think that I saw that. I mean, I know the people that you read and listen to, Jess, because we're such good friends, but it was cool to see the way that their ideas and their heartbeat really shaped you as a person, which of course came
Mm,
out in the book too. So let's talk about that. Like, who are some of the people that you listened to in the process of
mhm.
writing this, and that you have read that really shaped your understanding of business, your understanding of doing life in community, because that's such a theme in the book.
Right. I when I first started Noonday, I was doing it alone in so many ways, and we didn't we hadn't built like a collective of women who were kind of momming and entrepreneuring at the same time. And I had 3 littles under 5, and I had a lot of my friends were homeschooling, and it was my own fault. Like, it's not their fault. Like, when we compare ourselves to others and find ourselves not measuring up, please don't blame your friends. Like, they are living their lives in the way that they feel called to live it. But it's when we compare ourselves to them and then measure ourselves by a standard that's never meant to be ours. And for some reason, I would compare myself to my homeschooling mom friends who were clearly walking in what they were supposed to be doing, but that wasn't obviously what I was meant to do. And that's when I turned to books. I turned to books to not feel alone. And I remember reading Tina Fey's Bossy Pants, and she walked such an incredible path to becoming a comedian and kind of momming, and then also kind of setting the bar for females in the comedian industry, which is still, women are such a minority, and women still are a huge minority in being able to start and scale businesses. So I felt a lot of camaraderie there. Of course, Brene Brown, who has such a deep influence on my life. And, I'm just so humbled that she actually endorsed this book. I'm humbled that she actually read the book. That was like one of the
Mm.
scariest 3 weeks of my life, when I was like, Brene Brown has my book. She is reading my book, and she will either endorse it or not.
Oh,
That was
oh,
frightening. I had so
there
many
was
friends.
no question. Isn't it funny though? Because yeah, we do scare. We scare easily.
We scare so easily. Hence the name of my podcast. You just gotta go scared. But yeah, I mean, I've got up until today. I mean, I'm still scared.
Yeah,
But yeah, her work, gosh, I mean, daring
yeah.
greatly. I thought it was just me, but it isn't. Eventually rising strong, and then her most recent Braving the Wilderness. I keep thinking, I don't understand how she keeps coming up with ways to write
Yeah.
ideas that are so meaningful. And then Andy Crouch has been a huge influence upon me.
Hmm.
His work, playing God, really reframed power for me. And, I talk a lot about my own struggle with comparison and scarcity mentality. And his work really helped me to understand just this abundant mindset, that we live in this abundant mindset, and that we get to partner with God in creating good in the world. And I mean, his work has been super profound. Gary Haugen, who was actually our guest on the podcast, the first guest on this series, he really started writing about courage a long time ago and reframing what courage could mean and kind of calling out that everyday hero. And gosh, I mean, those are some of the people that definitely helped give me a framework um to not feel alone. And then it's crazy to, yeah, now I have a book.
Yeah. And you're going to do that for so many other people. And honestly, we haven't even mentioned the name of the book. The book is called Imperfect Courage. And if you have not ordered it on Amazon, you need to go do that right now. You will want to order it. And especially at the end of this podcast, you're going to want to. So go do it right now. But what I love about this book is, friend, it's so real. It's so real. And I can say, because I got to watch it, it was lived
Mm,
as beautifully as it was written. And that's saying something.
mhm,
And so what I love about this book, let's get into the book, because it is so challenging. And what's challenging about it, and you say it early, you talk about the bubble wrap that Andy Crouch mentions about protecting our lives, that we oftentimes bubble wrap our lives. And
mhm,
it's it's a gift that privilege gives us. But
mhm,
you really challenge us to take it off. You say this is something that doesn't actually build a fulfilling life.
mm,
Talk about that for a minute, about the risk and the initial jumping
mhm.
that Noonday required, that adoption required.
Yeah,
This courage that you preach,
yes,
it's been costly.
it has. It has, and yet I think it's the invitation that we're all given, is to, we are each invited into this life where we can choose courage over comfort. And I think for me, this journey has been one long journey in getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that just hasn't stopped. Like, it still hasn't stopped. Like, it's been eight
Yeah.
years, and I'm like, wow, it's still uncomfortable. But for me, I think for so long, I let fear sideline me instead of making it my friend. And I was just afraid. And when I think back to that first trunk show, I really was the middle school girl in that moment. And I was just, for some reason, the fear that's most real to me, and I talk about this in my book, is this lie that I'm all alone in the world and that it's all on me.
Mm.
So it's like I'm ultimately alone, and it's going to be on me to solve and figure it out and get it done. And I didn't know that at the time. That's lots of therapy that's helped me to realize that. I didn't, like, 8 years ago, I just felt wacky and rejected and a mess and fearful, and I think that I remember we were broke. I mean, we had this real estate company, and we had a nest egg, and I was just, we had decided to adopt. We knew that we wanted to bring Jack into our family through adoption, and we had two kids already. And I think for our third, it was just like, you know what, like, we don't have to do this old fashioned way. There's a lot of ways to bring a child into a family. And we decided, okay, we're going to land on international adoption. And of course, it was crazy because the moment we decided, and then we felt like it was confirmed. Like, the crazy, crazy story is, once people kind of got word, oh, we're kind of researching international adoption, one of my friends was in Rwanda, and he was actually there interviewing to work for International Justice Mission. And he met a woman named Jennifer who had just finished an adoption of a Rwandan little boy. And she was wanting to help American families adopt. And so he emailed me and he said, hey, I heard that you're maybe considering adoption. I met this woman, Jennifer. I mean, you want me to connect you? And I'm like, oh, that's crazy. I mean, Rwanda, I didn't even, of course, I knew about Rwanda from Hotel Rwanda and the genocide, but it was not on my radar at all. And I was like, yeah, sure. Get her in touch. We'll see. Well, then I thought, okay, what do we do? When you Google and God, you can change the world with those two things. And so I Google international adoption in Rwanda. And the first blog that pops up, I'm reading it, and I'm like, okay, this girl's kind of breaking it down. And well, I ended up just filling out her contact me. So I contact, hey, I'm thinking about adopting from Rwanda. And she reaches back out. She's like, oh, that's so crazy. Well, I'm in Austin. Like, do you want to get together? And I was like, oh, cool, sure. So then I go to her About You page just so that I know I'm not going to meet an axe murderer. I click on the About You page, and there is a picture of Emily Farrar Schultz, who was my college roommate. And
Uh,
then in Zap, she's like, yeah, there's a bunch of girls from my church that are adopting. That was you. That was Laura Choi. That was her.
uh,
I mean,
yeah.
I was like, what? Like, out of like, there's only 250 kids in the entire country that year that were adopted from Rwanda. And here, 4 of them were right here in Austin, Texas. So that was a huge, obvious confirmation. But the moment then we started walking down that road, and we were kind of comforted, we had our little bubble wrap of a nest egg that we had been, honestly, I didn't even say this in the book, but we'd actually been given money a couple Christmases in a row from my parents. And we just kind of like stashed that. And we were like, great, we have that stashed cash. And that's what we're going to use for this $25,000 decision. Well, suddenly our real estate business just falls apart. I mean, completely falls apart to the point where we are putting groceries on the credit card. I mean, I think it was like we decided to adopt, and then 6 months later, we literally are like, there's not only no nest egg anymore, we're actually shuffling around credit cards. But I knew, well, God didn't change his mind, and I think that is part of that bubble wrap moment. I think we want to lean into these comfortable little things that we've set up, like, yeah, we're taking a risk, but still there's still some self-reliance there, right? Because I'm all alone in the world.
Yeah.
And ultimately I'm the one who's going to have to figure this out, right? So then there's this moment where it's like, if I don't reach out for help, like, this isn't going to happen. And that mortified me, which it's funny because I saw you just put this on your Instagram this week, like, people reach out for help. And I find that alone is such a moment of ripping the wrapper off for so many women. And I think the motivation is different. I think some people just want to be independent, self-reliant. Some people feel like they don't want to be, have to return a favor, or, don't want to appear weak, or don't want to inconvenience others, or whatever it might be. But there is that moment where it's like, if I don't bring other people into this, then this is simply not going to happen.
Mm.
And so I knew, okay, it's either asking other people for help, or it's starting something where I need to ask people to purchase something from me. And of course, at that time, I had previously, when we were in that 6 months previous, when we were in the adoption phase, the research phase, we had actually taken a trip to Uganda. In order to go meet up with some friends, and then also sort of begin to research that international adoption process. And on that trip, my friends living there had said, we have a crate of African goods sitting in America. And we, like, would you want to try to sell it? You could even use some of that money for your adoption. And I had totally blown them off. I was like, are you kidding me? I've got like a real estate company. I've got 2 little kids. Like, I'm not going to start selling African stuff. I mean, thank you. And I hope that goes well for you. And then 6 months later, I'm like, hey guys, is that stuff still sitting around? And they're like, yes, totally. Like, and in fact, Jessica, you can just have it. Like, take it. We've already paid the artisans. Just take it. And in that moment, I took it for free. I mean, I just had to accept that gift. And then I had to ask people, are you going to be a part of this? Are you going to purchase from me? And I was just so afraid. I was afraid that no one was going to show up. I was afraid of how I was going to be perceived, because we still were trying to have this real estate career. Well, who wants to hire a failing, like, oh my God, they're broke and they have this real estate come? Obviously, I don't want to hire them. So I was like afraid, like, people were going to come to my house and see, because I didn't just sell the jewelry. I was selling like my grandma's dishes and like all my clothes.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, girl. Like my entire house was basically for sale. Like,
okay. So I want to pause you right here because this is so big and I want to fast forward. For those of you that have not heard of Noonday, I just want you to understand what we're talking about. When you're hearing the beginnings of this, I want you to understand that Noonday in 2015 was named one of the top 40 fastest growing companies by Inc. magazine. So we are, in case you don't have perspective of these humble beginnings, but let me also say to all of you that are in this season of struggle, whatever that struggle is, it's possible that desperation could be the birthplace of something. And honestly, Noonday, because I was there, I can say with integrity that this is not exaggerating. Noonday does not exist unless there was desperation.
It's true. I mean, it's absolutely true, because Joe and I had raised our salary before, when in our early 20s, when we had lived overseas with Food for the Hungry. And I was like, there is no way I am not about to go fundraise. Like, I just did not want to do that. And of course, friends still gave us checks along the way throughout our adoption process too. But yeah, I mean, there was that moment of like, I was cornered by courage. I was cornered by courage. And, I think I really want that to encourage people, because I think so many people are waiting until this moment of fearlessness, and they're waiting until they're like not going to mess up. And, you and I have both struggled with this fear of success. Like, well, gosh, what if this is wildly successful and I'm going to become proud? And I'm going to like care so much about myself. And then I can't do it, or what if this fails? And then I drag other people down and I go into debt. Well, then I'm not going to do it. I mean, we can spin around and around with our what ifs. And thanks to the gift of Google, we can be in analysis paralysis forever. Thanks to the gift of social media, we can compare our very beginnings to someone else's endings all day long. We could sit all day long, all week long, and just scroll and think that you're actually moving forward with your thing, when all you're doing is moping and drowning in comparison. And I just think in that moment, it was desperate, but courage cornered me. Now, it didn't feel like courage. It felt like desperation. That's what it felt like. But in that moment, it was like, okay, I'm just going to stand up, and I'm going to go scared. I'm going to invite people over, no matter what. If this does look desperate to some people, so be it. Maybe it will, and they'll never hire us to be their realtor. Oh, well, maybe no one will come. Okay, that's okay. At least I had a night of actually cleaning my house, getting it ready for people. And you know what? People came. And that was the thing. People came because I believe women want to show up for one another. Like that, I believe we are wired for sisterhood. We have a reputation for tearing each other down, for being catty, for elbowing instead of reaching out a hand. But I believe, I mean, if you look through the ages, I mean, we are tribal. I mean, we raise each other's kids. I mean, there is not a country that I do not go visit where I am completely confused usually if there's like a little 3-year-old in a group of women, and I'm like, I have no idea who this mama is, because the mama is the us.
Yeah.
And that's how we are wired. I think American culture has driven us into isolation and self-sufficiency. But I think when we choose the sisterhood way, the tribal way, that, my friends, is where the magic happens. And that's what happened for me. It wasn't the solopreneur. And then after that first night, people came. And then the next day it was like, okay, I mean, I think I could do this again. Like maybe someone else will open her home for me. And I texted my friends in Uganda and said, okay, it's sold. And they said, well, you know what? Why not buy it? Like, why not? We want to connect you with Jolly and Daniel, who ended up becoming my first artisan partners. And why don't you see if you can actually turn this into a business? So I was like, okay. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. We went and set up a Western Union account. What's crazy is that Jalia and Daniel didn't know what they were doing. I mean, it was hilarious. Jalia finally admitted this year, which I love. She's like, Jessica, we didn't know how to make paper beads. When you placed that first order, we had no idea. Like, no,
No.
they just went, they had walked by a woman living in the slums that was making them and was like, can you teach us how to do this? So,
Oh my goodness. And then they end up hiring hundreds
oh
and
yeah,
hundreds of
400
those
people
women.
now that work for them. But it's not because we had expertise, but you know what? We had
Right.
grit, we had
Yeah.
desire, and I think desire to see flourishing come. Because this was for Jack, but ultimately, very quickly, the success of Noonday was now completely tied into the success of Jalia and Daniel as well. And man, once you start linking arms with people, and it's not just about your failure. I mean, it's safe to go, oh, okay, it's just me. It's not really going to hurt other people. This fails. Like, sure, maybe my pride will be wounded. But when you bring other people along and your failure would actually impact others, I mean, that's sisterhood, right? Like we want to do sisterhood when we know everything's going to turn out great, but that's not really what sisterhood is. Sisterhood is the imperfect, the ugly, the like, I am not leaving until you're okay. And that is the kind of sisterhood that I've been able to experience over the last 8 years. Is we're in this together, and especially with our artisan partners that are around the world, that our prosperity is linked to theirs now.
Well, and it's been such a motivating force, right? And I can say, because I've seen Jessica when nobody else is looking. I've seen Jessica cry and beat the table. And the thing you cry about the most is your concern for your sisters that are around the world. You want to give as many jobs away as possible. In fact, we were talking about the book coming out, and you were a little bit nervous. This was a few days ago. And I was like, go to the heart of it. Like, what's your biggest fear? And she was like, honestly, I just want it to succeed so that the Jalias that I'm sisters with succeed. Like this, even, and I say that to say, yes, like that is the core heart of Jess. And those of you that don't know her, this is what she believes. This is what she hits the table for,
Mm.
is the good of others, and that her life would be good for others and her work would be good for others. And yet I also tell you that because it's a contagious mission. And I believe that it helps us get over ourselves and all those fears that you talk about. That's what I've seen in your life, Jess, is those have been so far pushed back. And now there's such
Right.
bigger fears, right? Because now it's not about, am I enough, or is this enough? It's more about, like, is this going to be enough for the people that I love, that are held up by this? It's such a different motivating force. And I know that pressure weighs on you a lot. I know that that's a heavy burden to carry, and yet you carry it with such grace, and you carry it with such a sisterhood. And even in that, you're looking at collaboration. Let's talk more and dive deeper into that collaboration, because I do believe that has been your greatest joy in this. And it really has been, I think, the thing that has made Noonday so unique and special
Yeah,
is
yeah,
the
and
sisterhood.
it's a choice, and I have to say the second section of my book, I think, is my favorite. Am I allowed to have a favorite? Like, it's just, I bawled when I read the audio version. Like,
Yeah.
I did. I was
Yeah.
like, this, and I think it's because, yes, I've grown. Yes, the fears are different now, but they're still there. I still have a tendency to compare. I mean, I called you like 3 weeks ago and I was like, felt like a child. I felt like a seventh grader. And I was like, Jennie, I am feeling jealous about somebody else's success right now.
That happened too. It was a different call. Yep.
Yeah, that was a different call.
I wasn't going to throw you under the bus, but way to do it to yourself.
Oh, yeah, girl. Yep. So there you go. There you go. And Jennie was like, Jessica, so few people actually do this. So I'm just.
Yes. I was so proud of you. It was so beautiful and tender. And
Well, and we don't.
I mean, we all feel it, right?
do.
We all battle that.
We all do.
Yeah.
We don't want to admit it, though. And I think we don't want to admit, our weaknesses. And yet, that is why I love the second portion of my book, because it really is this idea that vulnerability, when met with empathy, leads to wholeness. It leads to transformation. And vulnerability is a choice. Vulnerability is courage. Vulnerability is moving forward towards a risk, a meaningful risk, without knowing what the outcome is. And that's happens in conversations, that happens in, hey, I really wanted to be invited to that that thing you did this weekend and I'm feeling left out. I mean, that and I think that work of vulnerability is actually what leads to the more courageous steps. Like those internal things, those relational things, because we are designed for community, we're designed for collaboration. We simply will not get far in life if we don't go that route. And I think that being able to have relationships that are vulnerable are really important. And I think that 8 years ago, like I said, books were my friends. I mean, I'm not going to
Yeah.
say I didn't have friends, but I'm going to tell you that, like, building our friendship, we have been extremely intentional about
Mhm.
it. And, I mean, I've had people that I'm like, hey, I want to sew into you and us. And, it didn't just happen. Like loneliness doesn't happen to us. Like in some ways we choose loneliness, which to me is empowering. That can sound a little bit harsh, but if you choose something, it means you can unchoose it. And so you can unchoose loneliness by just starting with one person, like one vulnerable relationship. I love this story that I share in my book when I would be driving home for lunch because, it's like year 2, still zero salary, still hustling hard, and at this point now I've got, 3 kids, 6 and under, and Jack is at home with a babysitter who I'm basically like, I actually had the business like pay as what they could for the babysitter. I was like, at least I have to be able to cover that. And but still couldn't afford to like go out to lunch or stuff. So anyway, I'm driving home for my lunch and I would always pass my neighbor friend who was friends with other mutual friends, and there they were on play dates. It's like these are the days where you actually had to have play dates with another mom, like when your kids are little. And I just remember feeling so left out and just imagining like, oh, they're getting a mom with their little ones. Of course you romanticize the thing too, like they're probably miserable, but whatever. And I'm just feeling that left out. And it happened enough to where I just thought, like, I am believing a narrative that I'm alone and that
Mhm.
they are not, and that I'm not included. And so, vulnerability for me in that moment was reaching out to them and saying, hey, like, sometimes working during the day can feel a little lonely because a lot of my friends are not doing that. I'm wondering, would you guys be open to meeting like maybe every other week at night? We could even use the noonday offices and we can, like talk about what it means to belong and, read a book together, whatever. And that was huge vulnerability for me, and ends up
Yeah.
every single person there was
Mm.
like, "Yes, yes, yes, we want that." And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
powerful because
It's
we
one of
long
my favorite
for
things
it.
about you. Yes, you are so intentional. And I just go back to too, like, okay, 2 weeks ago. So this didn't make it into the book, obviously. When you call me and you say that, what were the barriers to that? Because I think people need to hear that, Jess. Like
Mm,
they've got the barriers. They don't pick up the phone and call the friend and say, I'm jealous of this person. Like it's again, I'm yelling at you because I'm like, it's so rare. It's so dear and beautiful. And I wanted you to be so encouraged that you were choosing freedom, that you were choosing connection. But what are the barriers and why do you think people don't cross them? Because I do believe you are onto it. And let me, before you answer that, let me just say this book, whether you're going to start a business or a dream or anything like that or not, this book is for you because of these issues that we all
mhm.
feel, whatever your life is full of: loneliness, insecurity, fear. Like that is common to man. Like we all struggle with these things. So, do not wonder, like, is this for me? Because I think it's every human needs to read this book, male and female. But just, yeah,
Yeah.
what are the barriers?
For me, I think that everyone has their own barrier, and it's usually built around whatever false narrative that usually comes from something that happened in childhood, right? Like whether you think people are going to leave you, or whether you think that, you want to be the one that is needed and you don't want to need other people, like whatever it might be. I think for me, I am My friends laugh so hard at this too. I say this in my acknowledgments. Like, it's this running joke that, and I think you were there when I said this because we were on that little thing at the ranch, and I was like, I'm just afraid that, like, if something tragic were to happen, like I end up, having a stroke, like Jenny's friend Sarah, like that no one's going to show up for me. Like, I'm going to be alone. And I remember Jen was like, I will beach curl your hair for you. I'll bring you your beach curling iron. No, you will not be alone. You're like, I'm going to bring you the statement earrings. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. But I think I still have that fear that, like, of temporary friendships, or that, like, if I'm not sort of the strong one, or the one that, I think I'm afraid that, like, people are like gonna be like, ooh, loser, like, she's out. She needs to go sit at that other lunch table because I thought she was in the cool girl lunch table, but actually she's not.
Well, and I think the power of what you do when you ask for help, like you risk this, but even when you called to ask me about this, and we're figuring out like when to do it. And I know probably for a second, you're like, gosh, I don't want to be an inconvenience, but I'm sitting there in my heart thinking, oh my gosh, this is the biggest honor that you would invite me into this moment that's so sacred. And that's how it always feels, Jess. It feels like an honor to be asked. And I think we've got to remember that everybody's just as lonely.
Yeah.
We're in great community in our loneliness.
It's true. I mean, I love to be asked. I was telling a friend that the other day. I was like, when someone asks me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm needed. I love it.
Yeah. I think everybody does. I think we all are craving
It's
it.
so strange. We all love to be asked, and yet I wouldn't want to be loved to be asked. Well, I wouldn't love to be asked to be like the PTA president or something. But you know what? I'm learning to say no.
That's right. That's a different sermon. Yeah.
Right. That's something else. But to come alongside to celebrate someone else and be a part of what they're doing, like, please ask me all day long.
So true. So true. So I want to read a quote out of the book that I love. It says this: instead of waiting for fear to subside, I'd made it my friend. Because when you've got a vision, you don't have time to wait around for your fears to vanish before you start moving. Perhaps the hero's journey is not for the few brave people after all, but an invitation to me, to us all, to rally our courage and go and do the thing we're meant to do. And I want to ask you this in light of that quote. What is your hope for this book? What do you hope it accomplishes for people?
It's so crazy because I give this metaphorical, or this sort of this vision, this analogy of being on the couch. And I had such a clear picture a couple years ago. I was prepping for a leadership event for our Noonday ambassadors, our social entrepreneurs. And I had a very strong sense that women were either physically sitting on their couches and, like, literally, like, sitting there scrolling and on Google and thinking, like, I'm never going to be able to, like, know enough, or I need to learn enough before I do something. Or they were zoning out, numbing themselves on Netflix and whatever else, with their glass of wine in one hand and their social media on the other, and then, like, their Netflix binge in front of them, or that they were metaphorically sitting on their couch inside themselves, that they thought, like, I'm just meant to be seated. And I do feel like there is an evil force in the world at work that wants us to feel small, that wants us to feel worthless, that wants us to feel like we have to be fearless or have it all together before we can get up and go. And then I just imagine this woman just standing up, and just like the simple act of standing up is revolutionary. Like, that alone can start like this inner revolution. Like, no, I'm not meant to be seated. And I saw her standing up from the couch and, like, looking back down, and, like, there's the big like lump in the couch, and maybe it's like got some stains from, like, your spilled coffee or whatever, but, like, suddenly she's like, that's not where I belong. And then the next step is she starts walking, and then she opens her front door and, like, feels the air against her face, and the light floods in, and her eyes begin to open, and she sees there is an entire world out there
Mm,
that needs me. That if I stay on that couch, they're missing out. Like someone is missing out.
mm,
Someone is not who they are meant to be because I am just either numbing out or perfectionisting out or whatever it might be. And I really want to take a woman or a man, we've had definitely a lot of men readers already, by the hand and just say, hey, stand up. And then, hey, like, let's open the door. And hey, let's go step out now into this world that we're all invited into. And just drawing that circle of compassion around ourselves and then encircling the whole world and being willing. And I think when we are awake to our own worth and sort of the part that we can play in the world, I think that we can engage in suffering so much easier because, I think in suffering, you can either become super paralyzed, but usually that's perfectionist thinking. It's like, well, I can't go start an organization, so I just can't do anything, or we numb out because we're just like, well, there's nothing like, oh, there's so many problems in the world. Like, forget it. I can't do anything. And I think all of those responses ultimately come from, a sitting on the couch mentality. But I think when you stand up, you own your worth. You own that you're not meant to be alone, because when you step out of your front door, guess what? There's neighbors. Like you got
mhm.
neighbors. There's neighbors. There's other people. And then I get this vision of an entire block of women that are like all standing up and opening up their front doors and looking around. And they're like, you too? Me
Yeah.
too. Let's do this. And I think that is the invitation that I'm extending to others. And I truly believe that it's transformative. It's a transforming message. I'm extremely passionate about it and truly excited for everyone to get to walk out this journey together.
Mm. Well, and it's what's happened. When you look around, it's already happened,
Mm,
Jess. I mean, my sister is a Noonday ambassador, and it's one of the reasons I believe in this book. It's one of the reasons I believe in this company so much. Her life's been changed. She was is a homeschool mom of five kids on a dude ranch in Colorado called Lost Valley Ranch, and they run this guest ranch, and she I just watched her come alive because, yes, she loves what she gets to do, and she's a lot's required of her in her everyday life. And so to imagine doing something else really wasn't up her alley, but to get to be a part of a sisterhood and get to be a part of a global sisterhood that was helping women around the world, that was up her alley. And that has what has brought so much purpose to everything she's doing. And it ties in so beautifully. But then I've also seen the other side. I've gotten to go to Rwanda and I've gotten to see the business owners there that are shaking it up and changing the world. And I mean, I expected to see women that were, I don't know, more like the women I've seen when we go to do charity work or nonprofit work somewhere
yeah.
and storytelling. And it was totally different. And it made me such a believer, Jess, because what you had were these very, very strong, independent women that are putting their own kids in school. They're paying for their own clothes. They're doing everything themselves because they've had the chance to get to be now business leaders and business owners. That
Mm.
this is, at the end of the day, this is changing lives all over the world. So a lot of people off their couches already because of
Yes, yes, yes.
this.
And I know that, and yet I know that there's so much more. And that's what I think is so powerful about a book in particular is as many channels as we have now for communication, which there are such an insane amount. Like there is just nothing like a book. And
Yeah.
I just can't wait for people to dog ear and highlight and step into their own journey of whatever that is of getting up off the couch and walking out their front
Yeah.
doors.
It's going to be awesome.
This is really crazy that you are interviewing me for my own podcast.
I know. I love it. I love that you asked me. I was nervous, but I love that you asked me because it's right.
Isn't that funny that you were nervous though? Like you were like the most interviewee person I know. I mean, my gosh, you like totally are a question asker like that. If
Yeah.
people were to ask, what Jennie Allen has done for them. It's like, you are so good at asking questions. So I am thinking, wow, she was nervous about this, but that just shows like, it's not about being fearless. It's about going scared. And like, we still get afraid to do the things even that we're created to do. Like, I think some people think, well, if I'm afraid, then it's like, I'm going in the wrong direction. But what if, because you're afraid, it means you're actually going in the right direction, you know?
Well, and I think that's exactly right. I think it usually is the reason, because the most important work we do is often on the other side of fear.
It is.
And so, yes, I do believe that is, it's not just what if, it's like, no, that's true.
That's true.
That's true. The scary stuff's the best stuff. It's just the hardest stuff. So we avoid it. And this is a call to not avoid it. And it's a better life. I mean, gosh, think of all of the conversations we've had over the years, many years now, and how many times we have called each other crying, called each other hurting, called each other with difficult hills to climb in front of us. And would we even consider trading what we've been through for the last 8 years? And the question is absolutely not. I know the answer for you is the same.
Right. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
It's the best. It's the best. You don't want to miss this, because it is, it's how I believe it's how we were built to live, that we were built to live poured out, and we're actually our most fulfilled and happiest poured out. It just goes against something in us too. Our selfishness, our pride, our fear,
our comfort.
Yeah. Comfort.
Well, thank you, Jennie. I don't know how to wrap this up. Do I say any last words?
Well, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say, if you've not gotten this book, go get it right now. Get it today. You are going to love it. You're going to get this huge dose of one of my favorite people on earth. And it is, that's what it feels like, Jess. I just felt like I got to sit down with you, my dear friend, and hear more details that I had missed along the way as we lived this together. So what a privilege. Wow. How you've led us into your life and your story and your heart. And I know it's going to be contagious.
Thank you. If you guys are listening to this on August 14th, we've got a launch party in Austin today, and then Dallas on the 15th, and Nashville on the 16th, Atlanta on the 17th, and then Minneapolis and San Antonio. Y'all go look up the dates for those. But you can go to Jessica Honegger, go to my Instagram, go to my website, and I would absolutely love to see you there. And Jennie will be there in Dallas. We're going to have fun. We'll do another little interview type situation and just celebrate. So thank you, Jennie, for interviewing me for my own podcast today.
I loved it. Anytime, girl. I got you.
See you soon.